How to have your own back. This is a topic that I want to talk about because I see that this is one of the main reasons why we have difficulty making decisions. This is why we have difficulty moving forward, and this is why we have difficulty transitioning to what we want because we are not owning our back. And I will explain to you what that means, how this shows up, but most importantly, what you can do about it. Because once you recognize that this is what's happening, then you are able to do something with it. And if you'd like to work on this together, you can also let me know. And I would be happy to do this work together individually. So let's start with the simple ways of you recognizing how this shows up. When you're not having your back, you stay in indecision a lot of the time, meaning you keep postponing and delaying the decisions that you need to make, or you have regretted the decisions that you have made in the past. And therefore, now you're afraid that another decision that you will make that's not going to be the right one. Therefore, you will suffer from the consequences and believing that if you don't make a decision, you will not be suffering from it. And that's the irony, however, is that if we are staying in indecision, we're equally suffering from it, right? The difference will be that in the indecision, we're suffering from the unknown of what's going to happen, while in making a decision and then fearing that this was the wrong decision, we'll be fearing the consequences of that. And another way that I have seen my clients not have their own back is when they don't want to move forward or they don't want to go for the transition they want to because they feel like once they go there and they regret it or they don't like it, then they will feel bad about themselves and their decision. And again, they're not having their own backs, right? So, the classical examples that I can give you is let's say that you have returned home after leaving the humanitarian sector for whatever reasons that you have decided to leave, and now you are regretting that you shouldn't have left, and now it's very difficult to go back. This is one of the classical ways of how not having your own back shows up in these examples. Another one that might be in a relationship, right? In a relationship, not having your own back is if you say that, okay, you will uh, prioritize a professional career over your personal life, and now you have difficulty building your personal life or maybe finding the person you want to, and then having all the regrets about how you shouldn't have done this and how you should have at the time prioritize your personal life, that is again not having your own back. Now, in a workplace, if this was happening, right? So in a workplace, let's say that we have our boss, our supervisor, whoever is a senior leadership in our organization, and if they didn't have our back and we did something and they turned against us or they didn't support us or they didn't stand by our choices when the consequences were negative, we would feel very disappointed about it, right? We would feel so disappointed that we would stop trusting them, essentially. But in our personal lives, when it comes to our own having our own backs, we often don't do that. Excuse me. Like if we were acting this way towards other people where we didn't have their back, let's say we have supervisees and we said, okay, I'm going to have your back no matter what happens, and then we didn't, we would feel very bad about ourselves, probably, right? Equally, they would feel very bad about us not doing that. Equally, we're not doing this to ourselves, meaning that we're not having our own back, and therefore we're not able to rely on ourselves. and therefore we're not able to trust ourselves, right? So you can see how not having your own back makes everything else stuck, frozen, or staying in indecision or regret, because that will just stack up more reasons for why we shouldn't be making a decision, more reasons why we should just stay where we are, believing that that's better than going for what we want. But if we look at a long term, we're just perpetuating the same pattern that we wish we didn't do before. Now we're just doing it because we're afraid of the next consequence. Right? So if you ask yourself why you do that, meaning why you don't have your own back, you might realize several things. One is you may never have learned to have your own back, and that's very understandable because we probably, most of our societies have taught us how to be having other people's backs, and I think we're good at it, but we're not really good at having our own back, right? So we haven't learned how to do it, therefore we don't do it. That's one simple explanation, right? Another might be we believe that if we stay in this indecision or if we stay in this regret, somehow we will avoid the next consequences of other decisions. But regret has consequences, indecision has consequences, right? So just because we don't make decisions or just because we keep regretting things doesn't mean that we will have avoided anything negative. If anything, it might be the contrary. It will keep affecting and impacting our lives currently. It will keep impacting how we are able to trust ourselves or rely on ourselves or not. And it will perpetuate essentially the idea that we shouldn't be trusted with decisions. We shouldn't be trusted with all the things that we have done in the past. And then we start disregarding everything that has brought us to where we are, right? And also, standing by our choices might be very hard, right? Because it would mean that we admit that we could have handled things differently at the time and we didn't. It would be very hurtful or challenging to admit our failures, maybe. It would be difficult to say that, yes, we did it. And these might be the reasons why we are not practicing learning how to have our own back. But the more we keep delaying that process, the more we don't get to live the life we want to, because we now are forcing ourselves to stay in the indecision and in the regret land. And as I said, the more we keep perpetuating that, the more we are afraid to make a decision, the more we're afraid to move forward, the more we're afraid to do something different than we have always done because we don't have our own backs, right? Now, the most important question is, how do you practice having your own back? And not someone else's back, by the way, even though that's helpful, right? But how do you practice having your own back? Now, I would suggest to start with small things or things that feel that you don't need to change anything external currently, right? So, for instance, changing something external currently would mean resigning from a job or getting a new job or whatever the external things that you need to change. If you don't want to or you feel afraid to do that, no worries. You can start small by looking at all the past decisions that make you keep regretting certain things or that make you keep staying in the indecision currently. Right? So for instance, if I look back at or I go back to my client's example, the one of the practices that she could do is she could say, okay, I have decided at the time to leave the humanitarian sector. And stay or come back to my country, home country, that was my decision, and let me own that decision, right? So instead of keep staying in the regret, I would like her to practice owning that decision, because back in the day, she did make that decision, right? So another client, I would I was talking to her recently about this as well, where she keeps regretting that she feels behind in everything in life, right? Behind in having children, behind in having a partner, behind in having a house, a home, and behind in having certain things that she wanted to have achieved by this age. And that's also another classic example of not having your own back. And the reason why that is because she had made decisions at the time to prioritize certain things in her professional life. And if now she says, okay, I'm regretting all of this and I have regretted all of this, what she's really meaning is that those decisions that I made were wrong ones. And by labeling them as wrong decisions, where are we going with this, right? The only thing we're doing with that, or the only thing we're achieving with it, is by eroding trust in ourselves. So if we keep regretting, we keep saying to ourselves, essentially indirectly or directly, that we shouldn't be trusted with life decisions anymore. Or if we're going to make another decision now, we will probably end up regretting again, because we have regretted all the decisions that we've made in the past. So therefore, you can see that we're just opening up a chain reaction that is harming us so much, right? So therefore, the practice that she could do is, okay, whatever the thing that happened, I'm accepting. I have decided at the time this is what I would do, and this is how I would go about prioritizing my life, even though maybe at the time I didn't know how to prioritize well. I didn't know how to balance my work life, and I'm forgiving myself, being compassionate with myself. There's no need to blame, but at the same time, now is a time to build that trust that I am trustworthy to be making life choices moving forward. And that's the only way it can happen, if we let our brain know that whatever the things that we did, we're owning it, we're owning those decisions. And now moving forward, we can rely on ourselves. We can trust ourselves to be making other life altering choices, decisions. The same goes for people who maybe have been let go of their organizations, of the system, and they feel like this is not how it should be, and they just keep staying in that space and not moving forward. The part that you could learn how to have your own back is how you reacted to those situations, and having your own back as to how you reacted in those situations, what you decided to do, how you decided to move forward, all of those you can practice having your own back in those circumstances before moving forward to something else. So you can always start by practicing whatever the decisions that you have made, whether how you reacted, whether how you handled it, whether how you chose and decided at the time. Owning those decisions will help you free up so much in inner resistance, inner battling, inner emotional space, so much that you feel so, I don't know, at least in my case, this was certainly like a liberating feeling of, okay, I'm owning all of the things that I have done, maybe certain things I didn't do, but I didn't know how to. But I'm going to be kind to myself and forgiving to myself and owning all of those decisions, because I am the one in the end made those decisions, whether I did it consciously or not consciously. And then that will give me the permission, so to say, okay, now moving forward, how can I have my own back no matter what the decision I make? Whether it's going to transitioning to a totally different area, whether it's going to start something our own, whatever it is, having our own back is such a crucial uh, game changing attitude in making whatever we're doing successful. right? So that's why the first exercise, as I said, you can look at the past and own all the decisions that you have made, whether you've done it consciously or not. And second, you start looking at how moving forward you can stand by the decisions that you are making currently that will have consequences, because that's how it is. Any decision and indecision will have consequences, right? So it is an illusion, or what is the other word? Delusion, maybe, to believe that indecision doesn't have consequences. So whatever the decision and indecision have consequences, and the part that makes it the big difference is if we have our own back in going through the consequences or not. If we don't have our own back in going through those consequences, then we will scare ourselves so much that we will then stay in that frozen period of our lives. The reason I say frozen is because we keep avoiding making any decisions. We keep avoiding moving forward. We keep staying in the same place that we have always done, because we just keep trying to find safety, right? And that's very natural that our like inner system wants to have a safety, but if we don't have our back, we are essentially not having our own safety. We're just saying that we can't be trusted, we can't be relied on, therefore we shouldn't be moving forward. And that's how we put ourselves in the biggest prisons that we can create for ourselves. So that's why, my dears, if anything you can take from this session is this: is having your own back is the prerequisite, a requirement for making any transitioning successful. The same is true when we work with other supervisors or senior leaders. If we can't have their back, if we can't rely on them, in other words, if we can't trust them, then anything that we go and do will not be as successful as if we had trusted them and were able to rely on them and have their have our back by them, and we know how that feels. And I feel like it's time for ourselves to have our own back, so that we know that we can be reliable to ourselves, right? We can trust ourselves and we can be reliable to ourselves, so that we go and achieve the things that we want for our lives now that transitioning is happening, whether we like it or not. So, if you would like to work on this skill and master this skill, absolutely come coach with me. Thank you so much for being here with me, and have